Hang on one
really
second. I want you have to say hi to Chris because
just the technology of that, the electrons that are going from Seattle to Hong Kong to Sweden and back instantaneously. I'm Chris.
I'm Michael.
And we're Breaking Impossible. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Michael?
I'm all right. I just got back from seeing my tailor, Roshan at Sam's Tailor. Part of the, the benefits of travel.
Yep. I saw you got out on the trail yesterday. Way to go.
I did. When we did our first video, I was still trying to qualify for the 4 trails. I didn't. I hurt my back. However, since I'm here, I'm going to scout each of the 4 trails. And I think I know what my problem with my back is, but I'm going to go see an orthopedic specialist when I get back to Seattle. So I'm going to wait to talk about my back issue until after I've seen a professional. We're not medical doctors and we're not giving prescriptive advice. Instead, what we're doing is we're telling you what we're doing and what works for us, and you have to talk to your own doctor.
So I think, yeah, it is important to get that out there. It's also important to know sort of our approach, right? Which is just to keep going, that each hurdle, whether it be back pain or foot pain or any other pain, is part of the entire process. The real thing is just to get out there and keep doing cycles, whether it's the next step or the next mile, the next trail, and just keep on moving forward.
Yeah, I only did 12 miles, so it was 12 miles.
Come on, still almost a half marathon.
Yeah, it was a section that I hadn't done before, and it's always fun to see that. Yeah, previously, when I'd been out on the trails 2 years ago, it was mostly wilderness type areas, with a couple of exceptions on the Hong Kong Trail. But this time I actually got to go through some villages, through parts of town. I haven't quite got to the part where you take the subway. The 4 trails is coming up. It will be February 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and maybe a little bit longer. So it's a little bit over a week away on February 2nd. So basically the first part of Chinese New Year.
Yeah, it's held every year on Chinese New Year. And it's important to say what it is and why we picked it. So it's 185 miles, 298 kilometers. Try to do it in 60 hours, no more than 72. And we picked it because it was just the hardest thing that we could find, not to mention the fact that it had to do with Hong Kong. We loved the spirit of the thing about getting out there and enjoying the trails, a whole different part of Hong Kong than most people think about. So again, kudos to you and for getting out there. I think it's funny, you mentioned you're on Wilson. I guessed from your photographs that you were on McLehose. So my mistake, you're on the Wilson. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's tricky. I took a picture of the sign that shows both because there are a couple of places where they cross over.
Yep.
And then I took a picture of a sign that said McLehose Trail, and unless you know which direction I'm going, you didn't know that I was staying on the Wilson part of the trail.
Yeah.
Until you saw the pictures. And the local runners, it's interesting. They know right where I'm at, and they made comments about it. Oh, I love that section. They could tell by pictures that don't have any other clues to where you're at. You just have to know the trails. And Andre even said to me once, he's the founder of the 4 trails. He said, you get to a point where you know where the rocks are. And then he kind of backed off of that a little bit, but he's not wrong. You get to the point where you pretty much know most of the terrain after time. And it's very helpful to do that. If you don't have a GPS device or an app to give you direction, it's very helpful to know the trails. And so I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to be here for as many weeks as I've been here, so I can go out and get to know where the vending machines are and where to turn left and where to turn right. It was a little tricky, this part of Wilson. You have to cross the street, and you have to take the subway to get to that other side. And there's no sign that tells you that that's how you get there. And you just have to, sometimes you have to reason it out where the trail's going to be. And then you find out whether you were right or not after you get to that part of the trail.
Yep. No, I'm being familiar with the trails, I mean, around Seattle, like I've been out on those trails so many times. Like I feel that way about those trails. Like absolutely.
Yeah.
I've not been enough on Wilson. I've mostly been on the Hong Kong Island portion of Wilson, and we've talked many times before about being the lead mine pass of Maclehose up to Mount Taimo. So yeah, I think you missed a chance to say the word recce. Come on, you're out there doing a recce. You know you are.
No, I've been using Scout. I've been saying Scout lately.
What?
I don't want to say recce too much.
No, that's impossible. You can't. It's too cool a word. Anyway, so it's interesting to note that the connection between this mindset of getting out there and doing all of this and really to be more empowered, and that wellness winds up being a byproduct. So we're not out there trying to just show off or just do something, but we're a couple of older guys who are picking the hardest thing we could find. And it's part of the motivation to just keep getting out there and to be well and do good. And to encourage everybody to really think about it in terms of exploring and exploiting what your body can do. Exercise is not a punishment for what you ate. It's a celebration of what your body can do. You can't find out what it can do until you keep going and keep doing it. And having big, impressive goals is part of the fun. And getting there stepwise also needs to be part of the fun. Like it's not just a grind. I personally find just great fun in getting out just for a quick one around the streets, around the corner, 3K, 5K, whatever it might be, just gets you out there, changes your mood, changes your mindset. And afterwards, I always feel better. It's really amazing.
Yeah, there are benefits from getting up and moving, especially going outside, above and beyond the exercise part of it. Just being outdoors has its own benefits. Nikki Hahn, one of the finishers of the Fort Trail, she's done it twice, said that you do the hard things over and over again until they're not hard anymore. And
I personally I these days just enjoy going out in the weather. Like so many people are just like, oh, it's raining. I'm like, yeah, so. Oh, it's snowing. Yeah. Oh, so. Oh, the trails are icy. Oh, so.
Yeah.
I get a kick out of it. And did I tell you there are Swedish lessons through the office are going to pick up soon, which I'm excited for because I really want to learn how to say my new favorite phrase, which I say every time. No such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. I want to learn how to say that in Swedish because it's just too awesome.
I was proud of myself yesterday because I wore the right shoes. I don't always carry the right stuff and I don't always wear the right clothing, but I wore my Gore-Tex shoes and it was pretty muddy out there. And it didn't rain, but it must have been 100% humidity at some point.
You are in the tropics, I mean,
I keep being reminded of that. I was dripping wet and I wasn't even running. I was just hiking this section this time.
I don't celebrate enough like how much I love being at 60 degrees north. You know that from my time in Taiwan and in Hong Kong and in Florida, like how miserable I was. Just the heat and the humidity are not my thing. Being here,
so you're happy.
Oh my gosh, I'm a man of the north. It's so clear.
It's exactly the opposite for me. I'm cold in Seattle, and I'm grateful that I've been away during the wintry part and the snow and the cold and the wet, and I'm enjoying the tropical sun.
Yeah, I will give you the sun. Like it doesn't bother me too much, but some folks around here, I snapped a photo of a guy. We talked about the Observatory Hill in Hong Kong. It's amazing. It's cool. Turns out there's an observatory here just up the street that was built around the same time, actually. And it's got, a telescope revolving thing. It's not in a dome. It's in a little tower. But anyway, I was up there running stairs. There's a guy just leaning up against the wall, like absorbing the sun. He was just like totally zoning out, just enjoying the sun. And it's funny, a bunch of the people I work with all call themselves and those people like that sunflowers, that whenever the sun comes out, you just get out and stare at the sun. I mean, they're not staring at the sun. Please, no one stare at the sun, but they close their eyes and they're just absorbing. And it's funny to see because they pop up all over, they bloom.
Yeah, this is actually one of the things I want to talk about is whether or not you should take vitamin D supplements and Speaking of the sunshine vitamin, Native Americans used to take sun the same way that we take a shower or take food or take rest. They used to literally go out and sit in the sun deliberately. I don't know if they knew they were getting vitamin D, but they knew there were also some benefits. Obviously, you have to be careful about, how much exposure you get, especially when you're in the tropics and all the rest of it. But there's a lot of advantage to being outside, and one of those advantages is getting that vitamin D, which is really the only way you can get it, or the best way you can get it, in my opinion.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm watching every day as the now we're on the flip side of the solstice. The day is getting minutes longer every day. So soon the sun will be up at 8:20. How exciting!
So it's not as interesting here, or it won't be as interesting for me in Seattle as it is for you in Sweden. But this is my favorite time of the year, at least when it starts going back the right direction, in my opinion, rather than the wrong direction.
Yeah.
The days are pretty short in Seattle. They're not, again, it's not as bad as Sweden.
Yeah, we've talked before about how Stockholm and Seattle are not that different for daylight. Like it's about an hour's difference. It's weirdly gets dark at like 3:30 during the winter. And so you get that sense of you're out shopping or something. You're like, oh, I really ought to get home. It's getting late. And you get home and you realize, oh, wait, it's only 4 p.m. Like, what was I thinking? Just intuitively. But by and large, it's about the same. It's fine. It's good. But thinking about, so not to loop back too far, but talking about not qualifying, like I also did not qualify. Life got in the way again. And so here's to 2023. Here's hoping Andre doesn't make us do it on a unicycle or something. Because each year it gets harder, which is cool. I still say that's part of the fun. So thank you, Andre. And yeah, so we're going that way. I think one of the fun things, and I think I might join you, is where I'm going with this, on the alcohol-free year. So, you talked to me about some of the benefits, and I'm thinking maybe you should convince me today, right now.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to do that then. So I made a decision to stop drinking until I completed the 4 trails, which when I made that decision was when I was still trying to qualify. And I made that decision because, well, let me take a step back. First of all, I've already been drinking less because of the importance of sleep and how I realize it affects sleep. Alcohol reduces your REM sleep, which is bad, and we'll talk about that later. I'm going to put a thing in the links below about Matt Walker and his book, Why We Sleep. So anyway, I decided to drink less because I wanted to have more time between when I finished my beer and when I went to bed. And so that just made it necessary that I was going to drink less, but also because alcohol is a sedative. If you're drinking earlier in the day, so it's not going to affect your sleep, it's still going to affect other things. It's going to make it harder for you to be productive, maybe less likely to do more training that you might do. So I just thought it would be maybe a 5 or a 10% adder toward getting able to qualify and to finish the 4 trails. But the thing that precipitated my decision to go ahead and not drink until the 4 trails was I'm here in Hong Kong. This is going to be maybe one of the biggest benefits of having traveled here, this trip. I saw a sign that said alcohol causes cancer, flatly. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. I'm going to have to look into that. So I did. And this is what I found out. Alcoholic beverages are classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a Group 1 carcinogen. And in its report on carcinogens, the National Toxicology Program of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services lists consumption of alcoholic beverages as a known carcinogen. So this is news to me. I didn't realize that they had come to this decision really 20, 30 years ago to list it that way. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Cancer Institute both list at least 6 different types of cancer that the risk is increased for if you're drinking. And there's now a move to put warning labels on alcohol in the United States as a result of this information. I'm going to put links again at the bottom so that anything that we talk about, we're going to provide the scientific data for, but I thought it was quite interesting.
I think it's, you should take a snap of some of those signs in Hong Kong. It sounds like they've gone even further than when I was there. Like they go way far in the like cigarette labeling, like on the packages of cigarettes, they have pictures of lung cancer and all these things, like way worse than anywhere else that I've seen. And it sounds like they're starting to do that with alcohol. So it's kind of interesting, that approach, and so different from the States, where you're kind of awash in it, right? Like you just get flyers from Total Wine at your door.
Yeah, and I think most people don't know this fact. I think this is, in fact, I looked into that, and it turns out most people don't. In this petition, and again, I'm going to post that, they say that drinking alcohol is the third most modifiable cancer risk factor behind smoking and obesity. And so anyway, I've made the decision based on having done a great deal more research. I've got plenty of time while I'm here, that I'm not going to drink anymore at all, because I don't think that there's any safe level of alcohol.
That's really interesting. So
yeah.
It's important to note that we have never been teetotalers. This is sort of learning in the moment, and that's spurred by your citing of those signs in Hong Kong and comparing some notes. It's interesting because here, I don't see anything about the cancerous aspect here, but I have noticed, there's a lot of strictures. Anyone who grew up at a certain point in the Midwest or even in Washington remembers liquor stores. Like you couldn't get wine, and you could get near beer, what we used to call near beer way back in the day, in the store, but certainly nothing else. Well, it's like that here. Like there is a specific state-run liquor store, and they close early, and so you have to make an effort to go get something.
They do that in Canada.
And it's more about the mental aspect socially here, but so many people are so into health. You do hear a lot of just crosstalk about how little you should be drinking and so on. That's a part of the society I'm really interested in sort of starting to tap into. I think I've mentioned before, like out in Seattle, going out on trails and things, the boys and I would just count. And like if we came across 20 people, we'd be like, wow, that's a lot of people. Every time I go out, no matter how far I've gone out so far, I'm seeing hundreds of people, like, and snowy, icy, it doesn't matter. Like I saw people barbecuing after a fresh snowfall when I went to the nature reserve down south. So anyway, the drinking, the sleeping, the getting outside, it's all very interesting to see how that affects your health, what you can do about it. And so a side effect of the Swedish thing, where I was going with all this, is there is a ton of non-alcoholic drinks to be had, like adult ones. Like normally in the States, all I come across is, okay, you got Coke and Fanta, and then like beer and wine. But here they have a huge selection of non-alcoholic beer and wine. So I've been reading up about did you know there's non-alcoholic wine? Like they de-alcoholize somehow. There's two methods. There's one where you boil it at a low temperature so the alcohol evaporates. And there's another method where they do some kind of cone spinning. So this is my little kick. I want to go on to find out what this means. But so it has the flavor of wine, but none of the alcohol. So it's kind of
interesting.
I keep saying it's interesting, but that to me, that means it's neat. That means I'm going to go spend time reading about it and like finding out more about it. And I'll tell you more about it next time.
Yeah, no, I want to know. Yeah. I think it's really interesting how you come across this information sometimes. I considered myself to be fairly knowledgeable about diet and exercise, and I thought I knew what the relative increased risks of drinking were in terms of cancer. And it's not just cancer, obviously, there's lots of other good reasons to cut back on drinking. But the American Institute for Cancer Research did a survey where fewer than half of Americans knew that there was a cancer link. And then the American Society for Clinical Oncology did their own study a couple of years later, where they found out that less than a third of people know it. So it's just, this is my opportunity to try to let people know, because I didn't know, and I think our audience ought to know.
Yeah. I think it's good also to point out, even if you're fine with that risk, even if you read up on it and you're aware of it and you decide you enjoy it anyway, to note that it can get in the way of your own motivation. Just having a beer will slow you down and will make you feel more like just sitting to have another one rather than going out for a run or a hike or a walk or anything. And so it's real good to note all of the different kinds of effects, physical, mental, motivational, and give yourself the best chance at success by clearing out some of those hurdles, making the hard choice to not do a thing, so that you can enjoy the benefits that may not appear obvious as you're choosing not to, but which you will certainly enjoy on the flip side of it.
Yeah, well, there's a balance to be had. And I've said this to you before, that alcohol is a sedative, but that sedation is not sleep. This is a quote from Matt Walker. Alcohol makes you tired so that you can fall asleep easily, but it also negatively affects the quality of your sleep. And the other thing is alcohol lowers anxiety. So it's a great, terrific drug if you want to lower your anxiety. But one of the side effects of using a drug to lower your anxiety is it may prevent you from learning other coping mechanisms to reduce your anxiety that don't require taking a pill or a drink. So there's two sides of it.
Yeah. Well said. I look forward to seeing those links on those books. I remember the name, but I don't remember the book. So I will also be learning when you share those in the links. So
yeah, well, I'm learning too. But like I said, I'm going to provide the source material for anything that we talk about. And I think that's one of the things that we're trying to be different, taking the long view and taking the scientific one and providing the information to back up anything that we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned the long view. Of course, we are taking the long view, but it's the cyclical long view, right? So we just talked about how we're not qualified for 2022. Well, this is kind of our third attempt at qualifying. We did our initial attempt at it in 2019, and then 2020 was COVID-y and plus an anniversary year. Last year, we didn't quite qualify, so we won't be running on February 2nd in Hong Kong. So we're aiming at 2023. And my view is that even if we qualify, when we qualify, like we won't finish the challenge the first time within 72 hours is my firm feeling. And then we will, and then we'll keep going. And then hopefully we'll finish in 60 hours, but that won't be the end of it. It's a constant repetitive cycle of small loops of fun to bigger loops of fun to this gigantic annual now attempt at qualification, attempt at running it, attempt at getting better, and finding all those little hurdles and clearing the way to partake in it.
Not only did I not qualify, but there's a good chance that even if my back hadn't bothered me, that I may have only barely qualified. And then it seems likely to me that I probably would not have made the cutoff for the first trail, even if I had participated. So why is that? One of the reasons I came here early was so I could spend time on the trails, and that's been beneficial, but that wasn't enough. I didn't do enough speed work prior to coming here. I'd been working on hills, I'd been working on elevation. And when I got here, I probably should have been doing more of the speed work. And it's a little harder to do that on the trails because of the elevation. So that's one of the things I'm going to change in my training over the next year is I realize that I need to work on my speed too. My endurance is good. My speed was not sufficient. So it wasn't just the fact that I hurt my back. I probably wasn't as prepared as I should have been. And not through a lack of effort, but through a lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I'm going to plug Coop's book. I think that little workout plan there is just golden. Doing the speed work to build the floor of your VO2 up and just the strength. And what's interesting, what I like about it is that he encourages the sprint work, the hit work, doing it on hills and stairs because of the mental aspect, which fits right in with us. Like you see a particular end, so you know you can sprint, and you have an end, so you are engaging with it the entire time. And then the ability comes almost as a byproduct. And when I have followed the plan there, its benefits were immediately and amazingly evident. So highly recommend.
Yeah, Andre says you can work your speed on the slight uphills, and there are sufficient parts of the trail where you can do that. But hindsight being 2020, what I should have done was go out on the map, which is right here. I ended up staying in Chun Moon, so I was close to the beginning of the 4 trails. That first few miles is the ideal place where it's slight gradual increase. That's where I probably should have been just doing speed work on that section over and over again to get my VO2 max up. I wrote that last blog post about 100 days of commitment and how I was going to try to improve my VO2 max. My VO2 max didn't improve at all. Oh, no. I couldn't go fast enough on the treadmill when I was in quarantine, and I didn't focus on it when I first started making my efforts to finish the Maclehose Trail.
Right. Yep. No, I hear you. That's kind of where I am as well. I'm getting back into it now. I think so. So we finally got into our permanent place here in Stockholm. That's good. The transition is nearly complete, and so I found a trail just yesterday here along 2 trails actually. One on Saturday, one right yesterday. Along the local canal, which is fun because right across is a giant palace. I'll send some photos. And then the other one, which I found even more fun, is and I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, but the Hagenparken? I don't know. So before the USA was established, the king of the time bought the whole estate. It's a giant area from a rectory, and then built his summer palaces out there.
What's a rectory, Chris?
Like a monastery, church. Geez, I didn't know there was going to be a test. Thanks a lot.
I don't know the answer.
It's a religious thing. Like I can't remember if it's for training or for retreats or whatever. But anyway, but apparently the crown princess still lives out there in one of the compounds. But it's got gorgeous views and all kinds of pavilions. And I imagine Swedes have 50 different words for ice, because like between solid rock hard ice and water, there's like about 50 different kinds of slush that you'll see. And on these two runs, I saw 2 things that just captured my imagination. In both of them, it was clear that it had gotten slushy and someone had just walked. There was enough ice under it that someone had just walked over like seriously deep water and left footprints that then froze. And so there's just these frozen footprints that go off into the lake. Like, and you're wondering, well, what happened to that person? And the other one, which is risky enough, and you're like, okay, people trust enough. But then there was another one where a dog had done it. And I was like, now that is trust about ice, that you just let your dog go wandering off in the slushy, icy. Like, I wouldn't have to want to go rescue my dog if it fell through the ice. That would be heartbreaking. Anyway.
So it's interesting. I had a very similar experience yesterday when I was finishing my scouting of the Wilson Trail. I got to a certain point where I knew I needed to stop so I could get back to Chun Moon, which is a pretty good distance. So I was off trail. I was no longer on Wilson, and I was trying to get down to the subway. And I knew I was basically going toward this one village, but I didn't know how far it was. And next time I'm off trail and I don't know where I'm going, I'm going to stop until I know where I'm going. But there were plenty of monkeys. This last trip out, there were the largest number of wild boar that I've ever seen in one setting. There were probably more than 100 of them. And they started crossing the road in front of me, the trail in front of me, and it was like 30 at a time.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I've seen 1 or 2. I've seen a couple of big ones. This is the first time I've seen that number of boar.
This goes right back to what we were talking about earlier about the fun thing about the Hong Kong 4 Trails Ultra Challenge. It gets you out there to see these parts of Hong Kong. Nobody really thinks about that there's wild boar just roaming around the SAR, but there are huge herds.
And I've had the same experience in Seattle, where the one time where I nearly tripped over a bear, I was very close to an area where there's supermarkets and malls. And same thing this time with the boar. I was less than a quarter of a mile from a very densely populated metropolis. You could see the sky rises and hear all of these boar. You just forget that there's wild animals that close in proximity to, you know, the freeway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, maybe we should wrap it up. We'll catch you all next time. Thanks for joining us.
All right, mate.